We'll start today's session by just taking a few moments of stillness. So you can simply arrive here by taking a few breaths, a few deep, conscious inhales and exhales. Just connecting with a place of stillness and calm and presence this morning. Just spending a few moments becoming aware of yourself, of your mind, of your feelings. Becoming aware of the fact that you exist, that you are conscious, that you are alive. It's such an underrated thing, just to be aware of ourselves, of our existence. But it's a great way to start these sessions, just to check in with you. Take that moment to quieten down the mind, relax the body. And that's going to be a way for you to open yourself up, to be more receptive to new information, to new learnings, knowledge, wisdom. All of that stuff will be able to be received more easily when you're in this open, calm, relaxed state. And that's going to be important for today, because today we're going to talk about inner child healing, right? So I'm going to guide us through a meditation a bit later to do some of that work. But before I do that, I want to explain a little bit more about how I see inner child healing work, right? A lot of the time when we're meeting here for the School of Consciousness, we're talking about our levels of consciousness. We're talking about rising up into higher levels of consciousness. And how do we do that? How do we connect with our higher self? How do we connect with a higher level of consciousness? And what you've got to understand is that we all have these different levels or emotional states, right? Every single human can access different emotional states and different levels of consciousness. And you can imagine that your level of consciousness is kind of like a pair of glasses that you are wearing, right? So if you are getting easily triggered into anger or frustration, then there is a specific set of glasses that you are putting on consistently. If you're being triggered into anxiety and fear, that's a specific set of glasses that you're putting on. If you're, quite a proud person, that's also a specific set of glasses that you're putting on. And when we put these different glasses on, our whole perspective of the world changes. The whole world view is filtered through the glasses, right? It's filtered through the level of consciousness. And sometimes, and in most cases, actually, we don't even know that we're wearing the glasses, right? And we don't really know how to take them off. And we don't know how they even got on in the first place. Most of the time, we're unconscious to this fact. But the easy way for you to understand which kind of glasses you've got on is just by looking at the emotional states you're being triggered into. And it's really as simple as that. That first part of the process of understanding yourself is just looking at which emotional state you are spending most of your time in. Which glasses have you got on most, right? And that's quite simple, right? All you need to do for that is just ask yourself and be honest with yourself the question of like, am I being very angry most of the time? Or am I being frustrated most of the time? Or am I living in a state of fear most of the time? Am I doubting myself most of the time? Right? Am I feeling anxious most of the time? And that's a very simple way to understand yourself, but you've got to be honest with yourself, right? Because oftentimes when we wear these different glasses, we have these different lenses on, we have these different filters over our eyes, we convince ourselves that everyone else is like that as well. Or we convince ourselves that it's normal. If we're so used to feeling a certain way, angry, frustrated, doubtful, we begin to tell ourselves, so we've got these glasses on, and we begin to tell ourselves that, oh, everyone else must be wearing these glasses as well. This must be normal. And so we kind of like unconsciously just continue to perpetuate the experience that we're having, because we're telling ourselves that, oh, everyone else must have this experience as well, right? Or everyone experiences anger, everyone experiences fear, everyone experiences anxiety. So my anxiety mustn't be that weird, or my fear, or my anger, whatever it is, it's not that irregular. But you've got to be honest with yourself and just go, okay, well, it's true that the emotional state does change and fluctuate, and people do experience different emotions. But you've got to be honest with yourself and understanding, okay, this is becoming an issue for me, right? I'm living most of my life with this filter over my eyes. Uh, and it's really starting to affect my life. It's affecting how I'm showing up in my relationships, and it's affecting, just the general quality of my life. And when that starts to happen, you've got to be honest with yourself. So if you're here and you were interested in the inner child healing work today, I just wanted to start this conversation with that, because it's an opportunity for you to just reflect and go, okay, cool. What is my emotional state, and which level of consciousness am I seeing the world through for the most part? Because when I get into the talking around the inner child stuff, it's going to make a lot of sense as to why that's there, right? If you're someone who has experienced a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, it's generally going to be because there is some anger and frustration within you. There's that lens over your eyes, and this is going to be from something that's happened earlier in your life. It's going to be a suppressed or a repressed uh, unconscious emotional imprint that's been left on you. And like I said, you have to be aware of yourself and just check in to understand, how strongly planted those glasses are on your face, simply by asking yourself, like, how much am I actually spending my time in this, undesirable emotional state? And if it's more than you would like, then it's more than likely because there is still some unresolved, unprocessed emotions from earlier in your life. A person who doesn't have uh, a lot of anger inside them, or a lot of pain inside them from earlier in their life, they're not going to get angry as much. So you might know other people who seem to be really calm, really relaxed, very positive and happy. They might have less of their emotional stuff unresolved, or maybe they just were fortunate enough to not even get it in the first place. Now, you can't really tell externally what people are going through internally. And, you could see someone like Robin Williams is a great example, right? Like, everyone thought he was this happy, bubbly, positive guy, and he ended up, committing suicide. So you can't completely tell what someone else is going through internally. And, it's not really your job to try and figure out what other people are going through internally either. It's more about looking at yourself and understanding what you are going through, and being really honest with that, and looking deeply into that. And this is why inner child healing work is helpful, because it helps you to look deeply within yourself. It helps you to take an honest evaluation of what you're experiencing in the present moment. And then it helps you to dive a little bit deeper into the pattern that is running through your life. I like to think of our lives as frequencies, right? Or these energetic waves. And if you could look back to the very start of your birth, right, when you were born, and you look to now, and maybe you're 30, maybe you're 40, however old you are, there's like a golden thread or a frequency that runs all the way back. As soon as your heart started beating, there was a frequency, right? And that frequency has been with you since you were born. And that frequency has been affected by things that happened in your life. It's kind of uh, in some cases, there's been things that happened that weren't very nice to us, and it really left an imprint on that frequency. So it affected that frequency, and it put us into a specific frequency, right? When we were young, when we were from like, 1 to 15, 16 kind of thing, that's generally when I find most of this stuff not necessarily stops, but uh, a lot of the big stuff, a lot of your big personal imprints and personal frequency is affected mostly from like 1 to 15, 16. People say 1 to 7, but I always hear of people with stuff from their teenage years. So in that time frame, your frequency is very malleable. It's kind of still being formed. It's still being developed. And anything that happens to you in that time period leaves an imprint. It really creates a sense of identity. In those formative years of our life, where we're still just developing our identity and our perspective, and anything that happens to us in that period of life, it really, really influences our perspective of the world. That's to say, it influences our consciousness. It influences our point of view. It influences what we think is real or what we think is not real, what we think is normal, what we think is not normal. All of that, our deepest beliefs, are all formed in those early years of our life. And so we have to be very aware of that. And we have to be open to exploring that. Even if you're like most people, a lot of people I talk to say, it's not that bad. Like, oh, my childhood wasn't that bad, right? Like I didn't have too much big trauma, you know, like I didn't have anything really big happen to me. And that's not necessarily the fact of what you need. You don't necessarily need big trauma. But if, for example, you grew up in a lower socioeconomic place, or your parents divorced, um, or something like that happened where it was normal for you to feel like you were poor or to feel like you had to figure everything out on your own, that something like that, as simple as that, it's not a big, massive trauma, right? Like you might say, oh yeah, my life was pretty good. Parents got divorced, but it was pretty amicable. But all of those kinds of things will influence how you think about yourself. And if you grow up in like a poorer household, like that's going to influence how you think about yourself. People who grow up rich, right, that influences how they see themselves. Now, it's not the be all or end all because you can change, and that's what we're talking about today. But it does influence you, right? And in some cases, it actually has a very positive influence on you. A lot of successful people have a lot of trauma, have a lot of these feelings of not being good enough, which is what drives them to actually achieve more, right? Some people, yeah, who grew up really, really poor end up becoming, really, really well off because of this drive and this desperation to get more, right? And the opposite is true as well. People who grow up really wealthy and successful, in some cases, they end up being drug addicts, and they end up being, alcoholics, and they end up, with their life going to shit. So there's no blanket rule here. That's what I'm trying to express to you. There's no blanket rule. The key is to go into your own past. And the entry point to going into your own past is the present. So to enter into your own past and your own timeline and your own frequency, you have to become present to what you are experiencing now. And that's the entry point. Because that's the first point. What am I experiencing now? Right. And then once you have an awareness of what you're experiencing, and even if it's not what you want to be experiencing, in most cases, people don't want to experience things that are undesirable. So we tend to run away from our anger, or we run away from our anxiety, or we just run away from our doubt. But my guidance for you today is to actually use the present. Use what you're experiencing, even if it's not what you want to be experiencing. Use that as your entry point. And go, okay, cool, I'm feeling this way now. And then why am I feeling this way? What's triggering this? What's the event that's triggering this in my life? Maybe it's, maybe you run a business and you're like, oh, I want to earn more money in my business. Or maybe it's you have a relationship and something about your partner is frustrating you. Um, could be anything. But use these uncomfortable experiences that you're having in the present as an entry point. And from there, you can go, okay, well, when did I feel a similar way when I was younger? Like, if I look into the frequency or the pattern of my life, when has this occurred to me in the past? When have I felt a similar way? Our emotions are like energy in motion. And the energy, it's moving, right? If we're continuing to if we're continuing to experience undesirable emotions, and it's just happening over and over again, it's just recurring. The reason why is because the energy hasn't been able to move. The emotion hasn't been able to move. The emotion is stuck. The energy is stuck, right? It's stuck in the body. There's a saying, it says your issues are in your tissues. Like if your tissues of your body. Um, So if you're finding yourself in a recurring pattern in something that has just kept showing up for you over and over again throughout your whole life, it's important to understand that there's some emotion, there's some energy that's stuck, that hasn't been moved. It's not in motion. Energy in motion. That's what emotion is, and it needs to move, right? It needs to move. And what happens when we try and put a roof on it? We try and like suppress it and push it down and say, no, I don't want to feel that. It can't move. It doesn't move anywhere. It just stays there. It stays stuck in your body. And so in the short term, maybe you can push it down. You don't have to feel that thing. But in the long term, it just stays there and it just pops its head up again like a whack-a-mole, right? Just constantly popping its head up. And in your life, you're just constantly experiencing this recurring pattern. And this whack-a-mole is just popping its head up and you keep missing it, right? So it stays stuck in its little hole there, which is just your body. So the key is to let it flow, to let it move through you, right? And this is generally the challenging thing because people are like, how do I do that? How do I feel my emotions, right? A lot of the time that's the challenging thing for people because we're not really taught how to do that. We go to school, we go through the educational system, and it's very logical. And we're all of us are, told we need to achieve things and we need to do things and we need to be right and we need to, we can't be wrong. And it's all very much up in here in the head, right? And we're not really connected to our emotions much at all. And we're not really taught that. And our parents, for the most part, haven't really been taught that. I think we're very fortunate to be in a generation now where this stuff is becoming more and more available to us, and there's more people starting to talk about it. I think that's a good thing. So we need to learn to feel our emotions because when we feel them, that's when they're flowing, right? When you feel something, it moves in your body. It moves you, right? And that's what you want. You want to allow it to move through you. So I'm going to give an example about grief, right? Because grief's an interesting one. I've experienced a little bit of that. And I've also seen someone like my mother experience grief, and we experience it in two different ways. Um, Although hers was probably more intense than mine. But recently, my grandfather passed away, and uh, obviously, there's going to be grief around that, right? What I saw in my mum, which was it was her dad, was a lot of resistance, right? A lot of I don't want that to be real. I don't want that to happen. And a lot of resistance to the fact that, our Poppy had passed away. And so her suffering has and is continuing now. And it's because there's a lot of resistance to it. And for most people, you would say, of course you don't want your dad to die. Like, of course you don't want your grandfather to die, right? But he had a good life, and he died when he was quite old. So, we didn't necessarily see it coming, but at the same time we did. But there's going to be this idea that we need to resist these things that happen, right? And that's a very common idea. But when you can actually just accept that that happened, even if you didn't want it to happen, right? It did happen. And the sooner that you can bring yourself into a state of acceptance and allowing yourself to feel what needs to be felt, the sooner you will move through it. So I noticed in myself when I was going through that grieving process, I would be sitting in meditation, and I would feel the grief come up. It would start to come and show itself to me, and I would just let it. And I would cry, and I would, like breathe my way through it, and I would accept it, and I'd go, okay, cool, yeah, Poppy's gone, and I can allow myself to grieve that and to feel this and to cry and to be sad, and all that stuff. And I just allowed myself to go through that. Whereas my mother, for example, finds it very hard to feel her emotions, and she's not in acceptance of that, and she doesn't want it to be real. And because of that, she struggles more, right? She suffers more. And so the point I'm trying to make here is that when we're coming to learning how to feel, learning how to process our emotions from the past, even from earlier times in our childhood, or even in the present moment, we need to be open to it. We need to be accepting of what we're feeling in any given moment. We need to actually open ourselves up to it and not try and run away from it. Because that's how we're going to let the energy continue moving through the body. That's how we're going to let the emotion run through the body and run its course properly. And if we don't do that, we're going to just keep the lid on, and it's going to get stuck in the body, and that it will never get processed properly. And when your emotions don't get processed properly, they just continue to show up like the whack-a-mole, right? Just popping their heads up at different parts of your life. And that's why you'll experience these recurring patterns. That's why you'll experience these loops, this stuckness over and over and over and over and over again. It's because there's generally some deeper part of yourself or some deeper emotional stuff that hasn't been fully processed yet. So, coming back to the little process that I was sharing before, the entry point for this kind of work is always in the present moment. What are you experiencing? What are you maybe not wanting to experience? What's triggering that experience? Like, what event happened? Is it something to do with your job? Is it something to do with your relationships? Is it something to do with money? Is it just your own self-worth? Maybe your own self-confidence or your own anxiety or depression. Generally, there's something that's triggering that in the external. There's usually some kind of external attachment that triggers those things. And then you can simply ask yourself, when did I feel a similar way when I was younger? Like where did this frequency originate? Where did this emotion, where did this energy originate? Where did I learn this? And you might want to take a few moments to drop into that, to relax into that. Because the mind will generally try to block you from going deeper within yourself. Your mind will tell you you don't need to do that. Your mind will tell you, this is normal and I don't need to look into myself this deeply. And your mind tries to actually block you from doing this kind of work. It's the biggest thing that blocks you, right? This kind of work involves you coming out of the mind and going into your heart, into your intuition. You have to trust your intuition. When you're asking yourself, when did I feel a similar way to what I'm feeling in childhood now? It's not very helpful to think about that. It's better to feel into it, right? So you got to quieten down the mind. You got to open up the heart. You got to trust your intuition. And that in itself can take time to, you know, get used to. People often ask me, how do I actually connect with my intuition? You get out of your head, right? Try and move your awareness from up here, where it spends most of its time, to down here in this heart space, and just feel what's there, right? And if that's not something that you're used to, that's okay. Just needs a little bit of practice, right? So set the intention to practice. Okay, I'm going to practice connecting with my heart. Recently, I had a guy come onto my coaching program, and one of his things he said was he just wants to connect with his heart. His whole intention was just to connect with his heart. And so he achieved that, right? So if you find it hard to do something like that, be intentional. Just set the intention of, okay, I'm going to connect with my heart and I'm going to start listening to my intuition. And when you can do that, you'll start to, the answers will start coming up, right? The the inspiration will start coming up. The memories will start to surface, right? It'll start to make sense. There will be things that start to reveal themselves to you. And that's going to help with your healing journey. If that's what you're on, if you're on a healing journey, there's going to be, and if you set that intention to heal the inner child, to heal your younger self, to heal your stuck emotions, to heal the unconscious parts of yourself, if you set the intention to do that, the opportunities will start to come. That you'll see different opportunities showing up in your reality, in your world, that will actually be trying to support you through the process. And it's your job to listen and to take those opportunities and to take action and to move in that positive direction. So that's your responsibility, right? And you got resources. You will be supported by the world. You've just got to listen and observe and be aware, right? So we'll finish off today's session with another meditation just to slow down the thinking, because like I said, often the thinking is what keeps us stuck. Because often we think we're right. Most humans, we think we're very smart and we always think we're right about things, right? Um, it's important just to get over uh, that idea and just also become okay with, maybe I'm not right about everything. Maybe I do still have more things to learn. It's a kind of humility, and that humility opens you up to new levels of expansion, right? That's in my experience anyway. When we're able to like learn, be open to learning, be open to like taking instruction from others and receiving guidance from the external world. When we're listening from a deeper level, from the heart space, it really helps us to move forward, right? If we're always spending our time up here in the head, it's very hard to make any progress because you're just stuck here. You're stuck with your own thoughts, you're stuck with your own perspective of things, and usually you're stuck with a certain level of consciousness which is over your eyes like a filter, and that can often be unconscious as well, right? So yeah, Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is what we were talking about last week. But we're going to finish off today with a meditation at 7:30 now. This will probably go for another 10 minutes or so. And I invite you just to relax back into your seat. And when you're ready, you can close down your eyes. And we'll take a deep breath. And relax. And just allow some space for all of that information, all of those words just to land. And you don't necessarily need to have understood everything I said. You don't necessarily need to have gotten everything out of that. It's enough that you've just shown up here today and you've listened and you've been open. And in this meditation, I invite you to set the intention to connect with the resonance, the energy of a practice like this, instead of just focusing on the words or the thoughts. See if you can get down into a deeper level of awareness. A more subtle level of awareness. Take a deep breath and relax. Relax your shoulders. Relax the tiny muscles in your face. Relax your belly as you breathe. And as we start our Wednesday, see if you can open up your entire body. You can imagine that your entire body, every single cell in your body is being penetrated by a transparent and pure white light. That is a very healing light. It's a very expansive light. And it's penetrating every single little cell in your body from the very tips of your toes to the very top of your head. It's dissolving any tension, any stress, any worry. And it's leaving you in a state of purity. An innocent, childlike state of innocence. Now, if there is something that you're wanting to heal, some recurring pattern, some emotional stuff that's continuing to recur in your life, showing up again and again and again, just become aware of that, become present to that now. We're going to use that as our entry point. So what is a recurring pattern that you've been experiencing recently that you want to heal and resolve? Take a deep breath. Get clear on that. And just explore in your own imagination, your own memory, the triggering events that tend to bring up this experience for you. Is it coming up from your relationships, from your job, from your bank account? Or it could be something else in the external world. Usually there's something external that's triggering us into a certain state. Just become aware of that as well. What is it that's triggering you? This is the thing that we generally point our finger at and say, that is it. That's the problem. Just become aware of that and just become aware of the fact that you do that. It's okay. Now you can go a layer deeper and ask yourself, when have I felt a similar way earlier in my life? And with this question, trust your intuition, move into your heart, and allow that memory or experience to come up from your heart. Trust your intuition and your first instinct on this. See if you can imagine that memory. See if you can get a visual, an image in your mind of an earlier time that you felt a similar way. Maybe there's a few different memories coming up. Just go with the one that feels the biggest for you in this moment. You can imagine yourself in that scene, in that memory. Visualize your younger self, just a little version of you, an innocent, childlike version of you, experiencing whatever it was that you were experiencing in that moment. Pay attention to how you were feeling, what thoughts were present for you, what perspective were you starting to develop about yourself at that time in your life. Just get a sense for that. See if you can start to understand how the thing that happened to you in the past created this perspective. And that perspective, whether it's been conscious or unconscious, has at some level stayed with you throughout your life, even to this very point right now. You can imagine yourself going in to meet your younger self. So the present version of you can walk into that memory, embrace your younger self, feel what they were feeling, begin to understand the level of consciousness which was suppressed, whatever emotional state they were experiencing in that moment was forming their perspective. It was causing a specific perspective. And in this current moment, you can go and meet them and remind them that it wasn't their fault. It wasn't necessarily fair. And it wasn't necessarily true either, what they were thinking or what they were feeling. Give them an embrace and let them know that ever since they were born, they have been these perfect little beings. They came out innocent, pure, and things have happened along the way. And that's not necessarily their fault, but they still happened. And just remind them that at the very core of their being is a purity and an innocent, that of a newborn. That innocence, that purity is always available. It's so clean and so clear. And that would be a healthier perspective to adopt, to remember, to remember. Remember that pure, clean, clear, innocent perspective. Because although there have been things that have happened to you throughout your life, there is a beginning point, and that beginning point is pure. And that is the core of who you really are. That's the core of who you have always been. And when you can connect with that, you'll experience great healing, a great return to wholeness. You'll experience a new level of consciousness, a new perspective. Take a deep breath. Open up your body. Straighten up your spine. Relax as you exhale. As we finish this meditation, I invite you just to allow any emotions, any forgiveness, any acceptance to run through your body. Anything that you feel was still unprocessed from that memory, that specific time earlier in your life. I invite you to open yourself up to that, to feel that, to accept that. It might feel like a stretch, but if you can also forgive yourself for that, forgive others, whoever was causing that experience, if you can forgive them as well, that will be very helpful for you. You don't need to agree what they did, but at least an understanding that if they were causing pain, they were in pain. If they were hurting you in any way, shape, or form, they were in pain. They were hurting themselves. And just that simple understanding or awareness can help with the process of forgiveness. Just a simple level of understanding that if someone hurt you or if something happened to you and it formed a specific perspective that's carried on throughout your life, it wasn't necessarily intentional. It was most likely just happening from a lower level of awareness. And that's okay. You can't change the past. All you can do is come up into higher and higher levels of awareness in your present moment. And that's what we're doing here. So take a few more deep breaths. See if you can feel into acceptance and love and compassion and understanding as we move toward the end of this call. See if you can bring yourself into a state of peace, see if you can bring yourself into a state of trust that you're on the right path, that if you set the intention to heal and to be a better version of yourself, to be a healthier and happier, more loving version of yourself, if you simply just be intentional with that, you can't fail. We'll take one more deep breath together, breathing in through the nose, opening up the belly and the midsection. And softening, releasing on the exhale. Take a couple more breaths like this. And in your own mind, I invite you to set in a personal intention for today, for Wednesday. What kind of Wednesday do you want to experience? What's your intention for today? When you're ready, you can take another deep breath, bring some awareness back into your body. You might like to move your hands or your feet. And then you can open up your eyes. Awesome. Good work, guys. That's it for today. Enjoy your day, enjoy the Wednesday, and I will speak to you soon. Bye.
Josh.